Hello. So today I'm doing a video on Tribune. This game, I think there was a Kickstarter on this. I'm pretty sure there was about a year and a half ago or so for a new version. So that ought to be coming out, or maybe it's already out. I'm not sure. This is the older version from Fantasy Flight Games, and hadn't played this since 2012. In fact, I remember the last time I played this was when that movie John Carter of Mars came out back, I think it was March of 2012, because we had played Twilight Imperium 3, then we went to see that movie, and then we came back and played Tribune, and that's the last time I played it until yesterday. I played it again so I could do this video. So let's get going. I'll show you how to set up and play, and then give you a couple thoughts. Well, the first thing you do is put the game board in the table between all the players. I guess it's supposed to be kind of city of Rome, and these are the different buildings. Anyway, first thing you do is put the card in the game board on the table. Then you sort these faction markers into the different factions and place them on the corresponding faction field. So these are the gladiators. They go on the gladiators. Now this game came with 6 of these. You only need 5 because it's a maximum 5-player game. And actually you really only need the number of players that you're playing with. So you only need 5 if you're playing a 5-player game. I'm going ahead and putting all 5 of them out, even though I'm only going to play a 3-player game. But you really, as I said, only need faction markers on each faction field up to the number of players, because each player can only have 1 of each. Then you'll put a 1-value laurel wreath in the laurel area of each faction field here. I'm going to go ahead and finish that off camera. Alright, I got a 1-value laurel wreath in the laurel section of each faction field there. And we didn't talk about, you got the gladiators, legates, praetorians, plebeians, patricians, vestal virgins, and senators. Then you'll place the rest of your laurel wreaths here in the Field of Mars area on the game board. You'll see they're 5-value and 1-value. You mostly just need the 1 values, but I guess if you get 5 1-values, you can put it, change it for a 5-value. Then next to the game board, you'll place your Legion tokens, your Tribune scroll tokens, your eternal favor of the god, temporary favor of the god, your denarii, which is your money, the proconsul figure, and the chariot figure, just in a stock area next to the board. Then each player will choose a color, and they'll take a number of followers. Depending on the number of players, in a 3-player game you take 6 followers. In a 4-player game you would take 5, and in a 5-player game you would take 4. But I'm playing a 3-player game, so I take 6. Then each player will take a family sheet. This is House Corneli. I don't know how to say Latin or whatever. Anyway, the faction sheet matches the color of the figures that you're taking, so this is white. I guess those are supposed to be white. I'm also playing with green, so we got the family sheet of green and the green followers, and the family sheet red, House Julii, I guess, and the red followers. So each player will take one of the followers and the family sheet. Each player will take an overview card and a victory scoring card. Alright, you'll shuffle these faction cards and deal 6 to each player, so let me do that. Alright, so each player has 6 cards. Now each player will look at their cards and immediately discard 2. So you're kind of looking to see maybe what faction you're going to want to take over. Since he's got a couple of patricians, he's probably going to keep those. So then he may just want to discard 2 of his lower value cards. So we'll just say player 1 decides he's going to discard these, and you discard them face down. So all the other players will do that, immediately discard 2. So let me take care of that. Alright, so all the players have discarded 2 cards. Then you'll take those discards and shuffle them back into the draw deck. Alright, so I've done that. I've shuffled those discarded cards back into my draw deck. Then you'll randomly choose, or depending on what the players want to do, select one of the victory conditions. There's various victory condition cards. Some depend on the number of players. But anyway, you'll randomly choose one or select one depending on how the players want to do it. And then each player will get a copy of that victory condition card. So for this game, I chose Carpe Diem. And then you can see, depending on the number of players, it tells you how many of these victory conditions you have to meet to win. So with the 3 players, you got to meet 5 out of the 6 of these victory conditions. And we'll talk about what they are in a minute. But you deal one, the chosen victory condition, you deal 1 to each player. So, voila. Then you'll randomly select a starting player, however you normally do that or want to do that, and give them the starting player coin. I always go with my player over here on the left, so he will be my starting player and get the coin. The starting player will get 12 denarii, so I'll take 2 5s and 2 1s. Then the next player, going in turn order clockwise, will get 13 denarii. So we'll just get his, and then of course the next player 14, and so on. So let me get that done. Alright, so my white player here has 12 denarii. My red player, being second player, has 13, and green player has 14. That's it. Game is pretty much set up, and now we're ready to start gameplay. Alright, so if you look at the board, you'll notice it's broken up into regions: the Thermae, the Forum Romanum, the Latrine, the Curia, the Atrium Octanorum, Catacombs, Pantheon, and Field of Mars. Alright, then the game is played in 6 phases. So in the first phase, you have your card placement phase. So first thing you'll do is, from the draw pile, is you'll put 1 card face up on the Thermae. Now you'll notice that some of these spaces on the board are light colored spaces and some are dark colored spaces. So generally the light colored spaces, the cards will go face up, and the dark colored spaces, the cards will go face down. So first thing in a card placement phase, you'll draw cards from the draw pile, put 1 face up on each space on the Thermae. Then you'll do the same here in the Forum Romanum. Draw 1 card face up for each space. Now the latrine is darker, so again, as I said, that's a fate. You draw a card and put it face down on the latrine. Now here at the Curia, in each of these spaces in the Curia, you'll place cards in each space until the value of your cards equals 5 or greater, or until you place a leader. So let's draw our first card. It's a value 7, so we won't put any more there. We'll draw our card for this space. It's a value 5, so we won't put any more there. And we'll draw a card for this space, and it's a value 5, so we don't draw any more cards. If one of these cards had been like a 2, then we would draw another and put it on there again until the value is 5, or until you get a leader. And it'll say leader on the bottom for leader, and they're a value 0. Alright, at the Atrium Octanorum, they are darker colored, so you'll put 1 face down card on each of those spaces. We come to the Catacombs. Here you'll put 5 face down cards in a pile. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let me straighten that up a little bit. Alright, then we come to the Pantheon. Put 1 face down card there. And no cards go in the Field of Mars. So that'll end the first phase, the first of 6 phases, which is the card placement phase. Now we go on to phase 2, which is the placement of followers. Alright, so we go to the placement of follower phase, which is the second phase. And in that phase, starting with the first player, he'll take one of his followers and place it on one of the areas of the board. So up here in the Thermae, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, there's 2 possible spaces. And you can place a follower there. And most of these, when you're placing the follower, you don't take the action at that time. That's later in the evaluation phase. But just so you'll see, if you place a follower in one of these spaces, you're going to end up paying 1 denarii for the card next to that space. And that's the same here in the Forum Romanum, except you'll see you're going to end up paying 3 denarii for the card next to the space. And only 1 follower can be placed in a space, so another player, if you put a follower here, another player can't put their follower there. You know, standard worker placement, only 1 follower can be in one of those spaces. Here at the latrine, there's no cost. But if you place a follower there when we get to the region evaluation phase, that player will then get to flip that card over, and then depending on what the card is, they can either take in denarii the value of that card, or if they want that card, they can pay denarii for the value of that card to take that card. Alright, next we come to the Curia. Again, you'll see there's no cost space on there. When you get to the evaluation phase, each player that has a follower placed here must discard, or can, they don't must. None of these actions are a must. If you don't want to take them when it comes to your time to evaluate that region, you can just not do it. But if a player placed a follower on one of these spaces, they can discard a card from their hand in order to take the card or cards from that spot. So remember, there may be more than 1 card there if the values, you know, if you had like a 2 and then you had to place another. Because remember I said they had to add up to 5 or a leader. So in this case there's only 1 card on each one, but there could be more. Anyway, you discard any 1 card from your hand to take the card that's adjacent to the spot you placed a follower. Now, any of these spaces we've talked about so far, there's no order in which you have to put your figure, so you know, you could put your figure here or here, just depending on what card you want. Here at the Atrium Octanorum, you'll see there's a 1 and a 2. That's not the amount you'll pay like you see in these other spaces, and you can tell the difference because they have this period. The 1 means the first player to place a figure here in the Atrium Octanorum must put it in the 1 space, and if another player does end up putting a figure or a follower there, they'll put it in the number 2 space. And when you place a follower in the number 1 space, you'll flip over any 2 of the cards. Whoever placed their figure there chooses which 2 cards they want to flip over. If another player does end up putting a follower in the number 2 space, then they flip over the final card. And the same player cannot place his follower, a follower of his on both of these spaces. It can only place on one. Like these other spaces, you know, you could put more than 1 of your followers in this region or in this region or in this region. But here at the Atrium Octanorum, you can only have 1 of your followers. You can't occupy both of those spaces. Here at the Catacombs, you can place 1 of your followers on one of these spaces. In the evaluation phase, whoever placed a follower on the 4 space will pick up the 5 cards here they will get to look at them, choose one, and pay 4 denarii for it. Then if somebody was on the 3 space, then they get what's left, and they get to choose one of the cards, one of the remaining cards, and pay 3 denarii for it. And finally, if there's somebody on the 2 space, they get to look at those remaining cards and choose one and pay 2 denarii for it. And unlike paying your denarii for these other cards, that denarii that you pay goes into the stock. Any denarii that you pay for these cards here in the Catacombs come over here into the Colosseum area, so they'll be in this area. Here at the Pantheon, you cannot place a follower here as seen by this Vestal Virgins kind of symbol. You cannot place one of your followers here unless you have a Vestal Virgin faction marker on your player mat. If you do, then you can place a figure there, and when you place a figure there, you can immediately secretly look at the card and then place it back face down. Here at the Field of Mars, you can place one of your workers there. And then later in the evaluation phase, if you choose to discard 2 cards of the same faction, any 2 cards of the same faction, then you'll get to take 1 laurel wreath and put it onto your family mat. If more than one player has placed a follower here, then you'll choose everybody that's placed a follower there will choose the 2 cards they're going to put face down and then reveal them at the same time. And then each of them that chose to discard 2 cards of the same faction will get to get 1 laurel, and then the player whose 2 cards totaled up a value higher than the other players here will get 1 additional laurel wreath. Alright, you can put a worker up here in the coin bowl, or a follower up here in the coin bowl. The first player to put one here puts it on the 7, and they immediately take 7 denarii. You don't have to wait for the evaluation phase. You immediately get that 7 denarii. And then all other players, or any other followers placed here, can immediately take 5 denarii. And there's no limit to the number of your followers that you can put in there, and other players can put theirs in there. Only one can get the first one, the 7, but any number of players can get the 5 denarii. And then finally you have the faction fields. You put one of your followers on one of the faction field spaces if you intend to try to take over that faction. The first player to put a follower must put it on the 1 spot, and then if another player is going to try to put one on that spot after the first one is occupied, they'd put it on the 2 spot. No other players can then put followers on that faction field, and the same player cannot take both spots on a faction field. So that's the available spaces, and so again, players will alternate taking turns placing their followers on spaces on the board until everybody has placed all their followers, and then you'll go to the evaluation phase. Alright, after the follower placement phase, you go to the region evaluation phase, and you evaluate the regions in order, with Thermae first, Forum Romanum. So you do the 8 regions on the board. And so again, I've kind of pretty much explained what happens in that phase, but if if you had a worker here, you do them again, as I said, in order. So if a player had a worker here, he would pay 1 denarii, and he would take that card and put it in his hand. Then he would take his worker back into his area, and this worker would pay 1 denarii and put that card into his hand, and so forth. Then you'd come down here to the Forum Romanum. Any players that had workers here would pay 3 denarii and take that card and place it into their hand. It, it says that the Thermae Forum Romanum and the Curia, that it can all be done simultaneously, but if the order does matter, you would do it from left to right, top to bottom. That's just the way I do it, makes it easier. So anyway, again, as I mentioned, if somebody placed a worker on the latrine, when it came to evaluating that region, you flip that card over. Then in this case, it's a plebeian 7, so this player could either decide to pay 7 denarii to the stock to take this card into their hand, or they could just decide to get 7 denarii from their stock and then discard this card. Let's see, then we come to the Curia. Again, as I said, if a worker is placed here, you can discard any card from your hand into the discard pile and then take the card or cards that are in that area. So the green player would do that, then the red player would discard a card from his hand and take that card. If nobody placed there, that card would just go into the discard pile. Any cards that nobody placed a player next to, they're just discarded when you evaluate that region. Then the Atrium Octanorum, kind of as I mentioned in the overview, the first time if a player, during the placement phase, if a player placed a worker there, he would get to choose any 2 cards and turn them over. If nobody else places a card there, or places a worker on that second space, then this player would just, when we come to evaluate this region, he would just pay 1 denarii and he would get to take both those cards. If another player did, during the follower placement phase, did place a worker there, he would turn over that 3rd card. And then when you do the evaluation phase, you actually do a closed fist bidding on the 3 cards. So both players would take their denarii into their hand, put a number into their fist, hold it out. Whoever bids higher gives their bidding money to the losing player, and then they get to take all 3 cards. Again, if only one player's there, he just pays 1 denarii and gets to take the 2 cards he turned over. Then here at the Catacombs, I kind of already explained how that worked. If all 3 players had placed figures here, then the player who placed his figure on the 4 would get to pick up the 5 cards here, choose one and pay 4 denarii for it. Then he would pass the 4 remaining cards to the player that was here on the 3rd space, and he would get to choose one and pay 3 coins for it. And then again, if there's a player on that space, he gets the remaining cards and gets to choose one. Any money you pay for those cards go into the Colosseum and not back to the stock. Of course, it may be that only one player placed a piece there and he placed it on the number 2 spot, so he would get to pick up all 5 cards and choose one and only pay 2 denarii for it. So it just depends, what workers get placed there. The Pantheon, again, I had kind of talked about that. You can't place a worker there unless you have a Vestal Virgins faction marker on your family board. But if you did, when you place a worker there, you get to look at the card in secret and put it back down. Then when you come to the region evaluation phase, anybody that's placed a worker there, you flip this card over and you have to discard, or if you don't have to, again, as I said, you don't have to do any of those. But if you discard a card of the same faction, so in this case you'd have to discard a plebeian card from your hand, sacrificing that card, then you get to take an Eternal Favor of the Gods marker and put it on your faction mat. And finally we come to the Field of Mars, which we already talked about. If you placed a worker there and you discard 2 cards of the same faction, you get to take Laurel. If there's more than one player there, all the players that discarded 2 cards, whoever's totals higher, then they get to take an additional laurel. All right, after the region evaluation phase, where you evaluate the 8 regions, then you come to the faction takeover phase. So as I mentioned, if you placed a follower on one of the faction spots and you're going to take it over, if you're the only follower there, then what you're trying to do is you've got to place down a set of cards from your hand that matches the faction you're trying to take over. And the set has to be at least 2 cards. So let's say this is the white player. Well, he's trying to take over the patricians. He's got 2 patricians cards. So he plays those into his area. And since nobody currently controls that faction, he only has to play a set with at least 2 cards. So he does that. Then he now controls that faction. He gets to take a faction marker of the patricians and put that on his family board. And the first person to take over a faction also gets the laurel leaf that's there, or laurel wreath, and gets to put that on their faction mat. Now, those cards will stay out in front of the player who controls that faction. Now, on a future round, if a player wants to take over the patrician faction, so you come to a faction takeover phase, and Green had put his worker on the patrician field there. If he wants to take over that faction, he has to play a set of patrician cards that either totals higher than what the current controller, which here is 11, so he would have to play a number of patrician cards that total higher than 11. If he does so, then he plays them in his play area, and those cards stay there, and now he's the controlling, he controls that faction and gets to take a patrician faction marker and put it on his board. The player that did have the patrician faction before, he doesn't lose his marker. You always retain that, but you're no longer the controlling faction. It's the player that has the controlling set of cards in their play area. So if Green played a set of cards that total higher than 11 and took control, then these cards would just go into the discard pile. And this player would no longer control the faction. Now the other way is, instead of playing a set of cards that totals higher than what the current controlling player's total is, you can just play more cards. So if a Green player was going to try to take over that faction and he had 3 patrician cards, even if they totaled less than the 11 here, because he's playing a number of cards greater than the current faction controller's number of cards, then he would then control that faction. And again, he would take a faction marker, and the current controller's cards would get discarded. And a player that currently controls a faction, they cannot place one of their followers on their faction field to try to take over a faction they already control, or to try to add more cards to a faction they already control. So if you control a faction, then during the follower placement phase, you're not allowed to put your worker on that faction field. If 2 players placed workers on the faction field, then the player who placed their worker on the 2 spot, they choose their set that they're going to try to beat the current faction owner with first and display it. And then if the player who placed their worker on the number 1 spot has a set that can beat that, then the number 2 player takes his cards back, but has to discard one as a penalty for losing. But if the number 1 player can't beat the set that the number 2 player played, he just doesn't play his cards, and the number 2 player gets to take over the faction. So when you're doing the faction takeover phase, you go in order, starting with the gladiators, legates, praetorians, all the way through the senators. And one thing I did not mention when you take over a faction, you get the faction takeover bonus. So if you take over the patricians, you get 1 laurel. So each faction has a different takeover bonus. If you take over the gladiators, you gain, you take 1 legion. And remember, legions are these markers, and again, they just go on your mat when you take them. So each faction has a different takeover bonus. And one thing I didn't mention, if you take over a faction with a leader, which I don't see one out here right now. Let me find one real quick. If you play a set of cards to take over a faction, and in your set of cards you have a leader, now it has a value of 0, so that doesn't really help too much toward your score. But if you do play a set of cards to take over a faction that includes a leader, not only do you get that takeover bonus, but you also get the leader's special ability when you take over a faction with that. Alright, so after the faction takeover phase, you go to the 5th phase, which is the faction benefit phase. So each faction has a benefit that their controller gains during the faction benefit phase, and you resolve them in order: gladiators, legates, praetorians, plebeians, patricians, vestal virgins, senators. And these mats show the benefit that each controlling faction controller gets. So if you go to the faction benefits phase and you control the gladiators, you can get all the denarii out of the Catacombs. Remember I said when you pay for these Catacombs cards, you put your money in here into the Colosseum. So if you control the gladiator faction during the faction benefits, you can either get all the denarii out of there, or you can take 1 card from the draw pile into your hand and get 1 assassin. And assassin means you can eliminate the top card of any faction control set. So, you know, if Red had a set of cards where he controlled the Praetorians or whatever, you can eliminate the highest value card in that set, unless that set only contains 2 cards, and then you can't make an assassination onto a set that only contains 2 cards. Because a legal set must contain at least 2 cards. But anyway, if you do the assassin, if you can do it, you can eliminate the top valued card from somebody's controlling set, faction set. Okay, the legates, if you control them, then you can take a scroll, which is the other side of this tribune, and you just put it onto your faction mat like so. Or you can get 1 card from the draw pile, and you can purchase 1 legion. And the cost to purchase a legion is the value of your set of cards that you use to control the legate. So like if you had 3 cards totaling 12, then you would have to pay 12 denarii in order to take 1 legion. So that's not a great benefit, I don't think. But anyway, that's your possibilities. If you control the Praetorians, you get a legion. If you control the plebeians, you can get 1 card from the draw pile into your hand plus 2 denarii. Or you can get a tribune, but you only get a tribune if you already have a scroll and you control the patricians. So if you had a scroll and you had control of the patrician faction also, then you could get a tribune. So you would just flip your scroll over and then you have a tribune. Okay, if you control the patricians, their faction benefit is you get the proconsul figure, and that just goes in with your followers, and it basically gives you an extra follower you can place out during the follower placement phase. If you control the Vestal Virgins, you can take a temporary favor of the gods, which is this purple favor of the gods, and 1 laurel wreath, or you can get a tribune if you have a scroll already and you control the senator. So similar to how the plebeians worked, similar thing with the Vestal Virgins. And then finally, if you control the senators, you can take a scroll or 2 cards into your hand. So after you've gone through all the factions, giving out the faction benefits to the controlling owner, then you go to the final phase, which is the Chariot Auction. And as you see, we have the Chariot here. So in this phase, everybody, again, does a closed fist auction. Everybody takes their denarii, puts a number of denarii that they want to bid into their hand. When everybody's ready, they reveal, and whoever bid the highest number of denarii gets to take the chariot. And what that does is you put it over a faction that you control, and then nobody during the follower placement phase can place a follower on that faction. So basically you're blocking somebody from trying to take over your faction. Or if you win, you can just decide to leave the chariot off the board, and then you're not blocking a faction. Maybe you don't have a faction, and so you want to win it just so you can keep another player from blocking a faction. So those are your 2 options: to put it on the a faction field to block anybody from placing players there, or to just put it off the side of the board and then nobody's blocked. And if there's a tie, then everybody just keeps their bids and the chariot goes off the board, whether it was on from the previous round or not. It goes off the board. At the end of that phase, you pass the first player coin to the player to the left of the current first player, and then you start another round. First, make sure you've taken all the old cards off the spots and start with a new card placement phase. Well, let's talk about winning the game. So remember, you have the victory condition card that we dealt out at the beginning of the game during setup. So for 3 players, as soon as a player, they have to control or succeed at getting 5 of these 6 victory conditions. As soon as a player does that during the round, meets 5 of these victory conditions, then they yell out "Veni Vidi Vici," letting the other players know that at the end of the round, they're going to have met all these conditions and possibly win the game. So what are the conditions? Well, Tribune, having a Tribune on your mat. We've talked about how you get one of those. Favor of the gods. We've talked about how you can either get temporary favor of the gods by controlling the Vestal Virgins, or you can get an eternal favor of the gods from the Pantheon. Either one of those, if you have either one of those on your mat, that counts as favor of the gods. 3 legions. We've talked about ways to get legions. 8 laurels. So you'd have to have 8 laurels on your mat. We've talked about ways to get those. 4 faction markers. So you'll have to have at least controlled 4 of the factions at one time and have their markers on your board. And have at least 30 denarii. And that's how you meet the victory conditions for this particular card. Remember, I said there's various other victory condition cards that have different victory conditions, and anyway, those are chosen during setup. But once players met one of those during a round, they yell out "Veni Vidi Vici." If another player happens to also during the same round meet those victory conditions, they yell that out also. At the end of the round, if only one player has met those, then they win. If more than one player has met those, then you go to scoring, and you score in this manner. A Tribune is worth 7 points. If you have a scroll, it's worth 3 points. If you have a eternal favor of the gods, it's worth 5 points. If you have a temporary favor of the gods, it's worth 2 points. Each legion is worth 2 points. Each laurel is worth 1 point. Every 10 denarii is worth 1 point. Each faction marker is worth 1 point. And ending the game. Oh, sorry. Okay, that's ending the game is the first player to have got the victory conditions and yelled out Veni Vidi Vici. And then whoever has the higher score would win the game. So that is how you play Tribune. So why don't we go through a couple of example turns and then wrap it up. Alright, so we'll just go with the setup that we already had from when we did our how to play. So we'll start with the white player. He's got the starting player token. So we've already done card setup phase. We'll just, as I said, we'll just stick with what we got. So now we are going to go to the follower placement phase. So white, we already know he might want to try to take over the patricians, but maybe he wants to. Alright, so there's no patricians on the board, so I don't really know what he's going to do. Let's just say he's going to come here and he gets to flip over 2 cards. And God, I can't pick this card up. He's going to flip over those 2 Vestal Virgins. Alright, go to the second player, red. Let's see what he's got. He's got patricians too, so maybe he's gonna go ahead and put a guy up there, so he is gonna try to take over the patrician faction. Alright, green player, let's see what he's got. He's got some Praetorians, so we'll say he wants to try to take over the Praetorians, so he's gonna put a guy up there. Alright, back to white player. He's not sure. He wants to get some money, so he puts a guy. So he immediately takes 7 coins. So 5, 6, 7. Back over here to red. I don't know. He's going to go to the latrine. And back to green. Maybe he wants to get Laurel, so he's going to go there. Back to white. He likes that 10 value senator, so he thinks he's going to try to get that. Back to red. He doesn't want white to get these cards just for 1 denarii, so he's going to go there. Now we flip over the last card, see what that is. Alright, back to green. He's going to go up here to the Catacombs and just go on the 2 spot, hoping he can get a card for pretty cheap. All white. He says, what the heck, I can get a plebeian for 1. So I'm going to go there. Back here over to red. And we'll say he's going to come here to the Curia. Old green. What's he going to do? He's going to try to take the Praetorian, so he wants to get another Praetorian just so he can have a good set. Back to white. He doesn't really see much else too good, but since he's getting 1 plebeian, he's going to go ahead and try to get another plebeian. Alright, back over here to red. He'll go to the Fields of Mars, try to get him a laurel. Back over here to green. Well, he'll maybe he wants to get a senator. Back to white's last card. Let's say he's going to go up here to the Catacombs. He's going to go on the 3 spot. Oh, red. What's he going to do? Well, he's trying to get Vestal Virgins, so maybe he'll... Nah, he wants to get 5 coins. So he just goes there, immediately takes 5 coins. And green says, you know what? That's a good idea. I'm going to do that too. Come up there and get 5 coins. So now everybody's placed their followers out. So now we go to the region evaluation phase. Alright, we start up here at the Thermi, so white pays 1 coin to the stock, and he gets this card to his hand, and he takes his worker back, and he's got another guy here, so he'll pay another coin to the stock, and he gets that plebeian. Alright, now we come down here, green, he's got to pay 3, so he gets 3 coins from his stock, puts it here. He gets this Praetorian into his hand, and he takes his worker back. Now white has a guy here, so he's got to pay 3 coins. He'll put a 5, get 2 back, and he gets this senator, takes his guy back. Now, nobody took any of these cards, so they can just go into the discard pile. And discarding face up or face down, there's a variant where you can discard face down. I'm not sure that it's really that big a deal, one way or the other. All right, we go on to the latrine. Flip that over, so now red can decide whether he wants to get 7 denarii or pay 7 denarii for that plebeian. He's going to get 7 denarii, so 5, 6, 7. That goes into his pot, and now this just goes into the discard pile. He gets his back. Now we come up here to the Curia. Red, he's got to discard a card from his hand to get that Vestal Virgin. So let's see. He knows he wants to use his patricians, and the only thing he's got is this 9 value senator. He doesn't want to discard it, so he just says he's not going to do it. He takes his worker back. Now green, he got to discard a card to get that 5 value senator. He doesn't want to do that either. So if I'd looked at those cards, I probably wouldn't have put those workers there. So nobody's going to do these. They just go into the discard pile. Alright, up here to the Atrium Octanorum, since both red and white placed workers there, they're going to do a closed fist auction for these cards. So we'll just say, white, he's going to hold out a 5, and red, he's going to hold out 6. They both reveal, oh, he got 6. Alright, so he beat white's 5, but he's got to pay what he won with. That actually goes to the white player, so he gets those 6 coins, but now red gets all 3 of these cards into his hand. And then the players get their things back. Now we come up here to the Catacombs. White is first since he went on the 3 spot, so he gets to choose a card, and he pays 3 denarii for it. So he's going to go for this. He's going to go for this Vestal Virgin Leader, and he's going to pay 3 denarii for that. And now he gets his worker back. Now green, he only has to pay 2 denarii. He wants Praetorian because he knows he's going for that. So he's going to pay, he's got to get 3 back. Oh, that money is actually supposed to go into the Colosseum there. So let me get the 3 and the 2. So I guess I could have just put a 5. But anyway, that goes in there. Green gets his guy back. These cards that were not chosen go into the discard pile. Nobody's on the Pantheon because only a person that had a Vestal Virgin faction marker could go there. And finally we come down to the Field of Mars. Now red and green, they have to, in order to get the wreath, they got to discard 2 cards of the same faction. Well, green decides against doing it because the only cards of the same faction he has is Praetorians, and he's going to try to take those over, so he's just not going to do it. So that leaves red, and he decides he is going to do it, so he discards 2 Vestal Virgins, so he gets a laurel wreath, and because he's the only one there and that makes him the one that discarded the highest amount, he also gets an extra laurel wreath. And then these 2 Vestal Virgins get discarded. And of course players keep their hands secret. I'm just doing it open because I'm playing by myself. But he gets his worker back. And that's the end of the evaluation phase. Region evaluation phase. And now we come to the faction takeover phase. There's only 2 players trying to take over faction. Green is trying to take over the Praetorians. Now currently there's no controlling faction, so all he has to do is play at least 2 cards. But he's going to play all of these cards. So he's got 4. So he'll because there's no current faction that he has to play more of, he takes over that faction. So he gets the Praetorian faction marker on his sheet. He gets a laurel that was there. And he gets the Takeover benefit, which is 1 card. So that goes into his hand of cards. Let me just flip those back over. Alright. I'll take his guy back. And then we come to Red, who's doing the faction takeover of the Patricians. He's playing 3 cards, including a leader. So he gets the Patrician faction marker. He gets the bonus, which is, he gets the takeover ability of 1 laurel. So he'll put that on his faction mat. And then he gets the leader bonus of 10 denarii. So he'll take that, put it into his money. He gets the laurel that's on the thing. So he's halfway. He's got 4 laurels all out of the 8 that he needs. So he's halfway to getting the amount of laurel as he needs already on the first turn. And his worker comes back. Oh, these workers up here in the coin bowl need to go back to there. And that's the end of the faction takeover phase. Now we go to the faction benefit phase. Well, only 2 factions are currently controlled. The Praetorians, they're controlled by the green player, so his benefit is 1 legion. So he gets 1 legion onto his mat. And remember, you need 3 for victory condition. And then the Patricians are owned by the red, and he gets the proconsul figure. So that's an extra worker or follower he gets to place out on the follower placement the next turn. It's the end of the faction benefits phase. We go to the Chariot Auction now. So everybody will bid on the Chariot. Now maybe Red is most concerned since he only played 3 cards, and that's not too high a total. So I don't know. We'll say he's most concerned. So, and blue or white, he doesn't have a faction, so he doesn't care too much about it. He holds out. He's going to bid 2, and let's say green holds out. He's bidding 5, and red holds out. He's bidding 6. So he wins the Chariot. So he's got to pay his bid. The other players keep their bid. Now he wins the Chariot. He's going to go ahead and put it on the Patricians, so nobody can try to take over the Patricians this next round. And that ends the current round. Alright, so we start the next round. First thing we do is the card placement phase. So put 1 face up on each of the thermi, 1 face up on each here at the Forum Romanum, 1 face down on the latrine, and we add up to at least 5. So that's only 2, so we have to put another one there. That makes at least 5, so we stop there. Only 1. 0, but it's also as soon as you put a leader, so we'll stop there. So it's if the total is 5 or more, or until you place a leader. Alright, these go face down. Then we put a total of 5 cards here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 face down on the Pantheon, and that is it for card placement. Go to follower placement. I forgot at the end of the last round we should have passed the first player coin over here to red, so he's actually first. Now he's only got a gladiator and a senator, so he needs to get some more. He sees there's a senator and there's 2 cards there. I don't know. Yeah, he's going to go here. Alright. Green, what has he got? Plebeian, nothing really good. So, let's see what he's going to do. And he's going to go here, and he'll see what's here at the old Auctionorum. Oh, 2 senators. He likes that. All right, back over here to white. Let's see what he might want. We know he's going to try to go for plebeians, so he's going to put a guy up here on the plebeians. All right, back here to red. Maybe he's going to try to get this one at the Curia too. All right, green. Well, he's going to get some money. He's going to come up here and get 7 coins. All right, back to white. He's going to come up here and get this Vestal Virgin. All right, back to red. Well, he's going to maybe come here to the Catacombs. He's going to go on the 2, hoping he gets it on the cheap. But old green, he says, no, you're not going to get that on the cheap. I'm going to see if I can get something better. And white, he thinks he's going to take a chance on the latrine there. Go back to red. He decides he's going to go ahead and try to get him some gladiators. So he comes here. Oh, green. What was he going to try to take over? Nothing really. He's just got to try to get him some cards. So he's going to... Oh, green. He doesn't know what he's going to do. He's going to come and try to get him some laurels. All right, white. He knows he's going for plebeian, so he's going to go ahead and get that one. Red. He doesn't want green to get these for only a coin, so he's going to go there, flip over the last one, see what's there. All right, we come back to green. Green's going to get him some more money. But you know, you got to have 30 denarii as one of the winning conditions. All right, come back to white. White says, well, I could get me another plebeian, or I could get me another Vestal Virgin. I'm going to do that. Oh, red. Oh, red. What's he going to do? Well, maybe he's going to try to get some more laurel wreaths and finish off. Green says, I'm just going to get even more money. I'm going to try to stack up on some money. And white's last player, he's going to get some money too. He's going to get 5 coins. And finally, blue or red with his proconsul. He decides he's going to go ahead and try to get him a gladiator. All right, so that's the end of the worker or follower placement phase. All right, go to the region evaluation. So we start here with the thermi. So white's got to pay 1 denarii. He gets this Vestal Virgin. He's got to pay another denarii. He gets this plebeian. He's got to pay 3 denarii here. He'll get 2 back. He gets this Vestal Virgin. This was red's proconsul figure, so he's got to pay 3, so he'll get 2 back. And he gets this gladiator. Nobody got this. Red, he's got to pay 3 again. And he gets this gladiator. And nobody got these, so we'll just discard those. Alright, come to the latrine. White went there, so he can basically get that for free because it costs no money. It's a 0. So he'll take that. He'll take that for free, get his worker back. Alright, nobody did this, so that just goes in the discard pile. Alright, so red, he's got to discard a card to get 1 card for each of those piles. Well, crap, he was going for gladiator. So for this one, he's going to discard No, that'd be kind of worth. He's not going to do either one of those. He's just going to say forget it. Keep his workers. Let these get discarded. Alright, we come up here. We have an auction between green and red for these cards. Green, he's going to bid 7. So he holds his out for 7. Red, he's not sure. He just bids 5. So green won, but he's got to pay his bid to red. They get their workers back. And then green gets all these cards. And then we come up here to the Catacombs. Green had a worker there. He's got to pay 3 into the pot there, and then he gets his choice. One of these cards. He just got a bunch of senators, so he's going to take a senator. Alright, now red, he's only got to pay 2 into there. And he gets his choice. He'll take this legate. And then these just get discarded. Nobody went here, so that gets discarded. Alright, green and red are on the field of Mars. Alright, so green, now since there's 2 players there, they reveal simultaneously what they're going to discard. So red ends up he's not going to do it. Green discarded 2 Vestal Virgins. Since red didn't do it, green ends up getting both laurel wreaths. That gives him 3. He gets his player back. We'll get these guys back from the coin bowl. And then we go to faction takeover. Well, white's the only one that tried to do a faction takeover. He's trying to take over the plebeians. So he puts down a set of 4 plebeians. And so he takes over that faction as there was no current owner. So he gets a marker. He gets that laurel. He gets the takeover benefit of 1 card and an assassin. So he takes a card from the draw pile. Now, an assassin, he can remove the highest value card from either the Praetorian faction or the Patrician faction. Since the Praetorians have more, he's going to remove that. So that gets discarded. So that really hurts the green player and his control of the Praetorians. Anyway, I take that back. And nobody else went for faction takeover. So now we go to faction benefits. So we go in order. So Praetorians would be first. So the green player gets a legion. That gives him 2 of the 3 he needs. Next is the plebeians, which the white player owns. So he gets 1 card and 2 denarii. Or he could get a tribune if he had a scroll and control the patricians, but he doesn't. So he'll get 1 card and 2 denarii. And finally we come to the patricians. And so he gets to keep the proconsul figure. And that's it. Now we go to the bidding for the chariot. We'll just say white. He's not too concerned. He's just going to bid 4. Now with green, yeah, he's kind of concerned about his Praetorian, so he's going to bid 5. And red, he's pretty concerned about his patricians again, so yeah, he bids 6. So he ends up winning. So he has to pay. Everyone else gets to keep their bid. He keeps the chariot and he keeps it on the patricians. Now we make sure all the cards are cleared off, which they are. We pass the thing, and we finished another round. So you can pretty much see how it goes. But in a future round, if somebody wanted to try to take over the plebeians, well, they would have to play at least 5 cards, or a total higher than, what has he got, 11, 15, 18. So they'd have to play a total of cards higher than 18, or at least 5 cards. And if somebody wanted to take over the patricians, they would have to pay a total higher than 14, or play at least 4 cards. And if somebody, or the Praetorians, and if somebody wanted to take over the patricians, they would have to play a total higher than 13 or at least 4 cards. So of course they can't right now because they're blocked. But anyway, so it goes until somebody, gets all the conditions, or 5 of these 6 conditions in a 3-player game. Then they say Veni Vidi Vici, and maybe they win the game unless somebody else gets the same conditions, and then you go to scoring. But anyway, I really like this game. It's pretty quick. I don't know why I haven't, played it in 9 years. The new version that I know was kickstarted. I'm not sure if there's rule changes, better components. I'm sure there might be better components, but these are pretty good even for as old a game as this is. But of course, the one problem with this, playing it solo like I did yesterday, which was the first time I've ever played it solo, is the blind bidding. I mean, there's no good way to do that when you're playing solo, but it's a fun game. It doesn't take too long. I like it. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.